Good evening, hello everyone. I'm really delighted that there are so many people live here because we don't know how long this will go again. Thanks for coming. We'll start right now. It's a bit hard to talk with the mask and with the glasses because otherwise I can't read, and with the micro it's a bit much somehow. Well, however, thank you so much, Verena Winiwarter, that you made it to hold this lecture tonight. I'm really very happy and delighted, since it was not easy to find a day, an evening where we can do this. But since I thought that it would be really, really important in the context of our master's program of our department, especially also in the context of the semester topic we have this winter term, namely methodologies of sustainability / sustainability of methodologies. And I think that your work in general, but your lecture today would fit perfectly into this frame. So very briefly, I would like to introduce you. Verena Winiwarter is an engineer for technical chemistry, a studied historian and journalist, a habilitated human ecologist, and a professor for environmental history at the Institute for Social Ecology at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna, also known as BOKU. She is the co-founder of the Center for Environmental History and the founding president of the European Society for Environmental History, as well as of the International Consortium of Environmental History Organizations. Verena chairs the Commission for Interdisciplinary Ecological Studies of the Austrian Academy of Sciences, of which she has been a full member since 2016. And since 2019, she also chairs the Council of Environmental Experts of the city of Vienna. Verena has received numerous awards, including the Scientist of the Year 2013 by the Club of Educational and Scientific Journalists, the Grand Decoration of Honor of the Province of Carinthia in 2015, and an honorary doctorate from Aalborg Universitet, I hope I pronounce it the right way, in Denmark. And since 2020, you're also a member of the Academia Europaea. You published an uncountable number of articles and books and texts. I don't mention just two, like together with Hans-Rudolf Borg, Geschichte unserer Umwelt, 66 Reisen durch die Zeit, which was the Science Book of the Year in Austria 2015, and the book Wasser Stadt Wien, which was compiled under your direction as a synopsis of more than 10 years of interdisciplinary research. And a recent article of you has been published in the KIOES Opinions, a quarterly, I think, or a irregular magazine published by the Commission for Interdisciplinary Ecological Studies of the Austrian Academy of Sciences, with the title Weaving the SDGs, a reflection on quadrangles and embodied practices. And together with the artist Charlotte Holzer and the artist and chemist Ellen Harsilius-Glück, the three texts describe a project which uses cross-disciplinary strategies to tackle various problematic issues connected to the reception of the SDGs. And this is also which you are talking about partly tonight. And so I finished my introduction. I would like to give you the stage. Thank you, Verena.
Wow. Thank you very much, Katharina, for this very, very kind introduction. Basically, I think most of what you mention is a matter of age. You know? It just shows that I've been around for quite some time. What I'm going to try to do tonight is to talk to you about a topic that I picked up after this book on Wasserstadt Wien, and that is the toxic legacies of humankind. The basic argument that sort of leads into this topic is that since industrializations, humans have put an increasing mortgage on the future of our species. Ja? Einen Kredit auf eine ungewisse Zukunft aufnehmen, sage ich auf Deutsch. And they actually continued to mortgage the future. And this is, to my concern and frustration, largely unacknowledged in the sustainability debate. And I'm going to try to look at a little bit, give you an idea why I think this is the case. I very much love this picture which says, keep out unquantifiable hazards, which was not taken anywhere. It was just taken in the UK in Conham River Park near Easton in 2014. The international regulatory bodies, which I'm working with to some extent, connect three things together. One is organized crime. There is actually something like a waste trade mafia, yeah? Corruption, in particularly corruption in cleanup of legacy sites, and hazardous materials. So there's huge amounts of regulation going on. Society, at least the technical and the legal experts within society, are well aware of the problem. But there is no systematic worldwide attention to legacy sites and their long-term management. And they should be a sustainability issue because they jeopardize reaching the SDGs. And in particular, that is true for SDG number 6, which is clean water. You can imagine that if toxic legacies seep into groundwater, that does compromise clean water. They also compromise other, and I would want to pick not just 14 and 15, which is life underwater, which is the quality of the marine ecosystem, and life on land, which is 15, which is terrestrial biodiversity. But they also actually compromise peace, which is goal number 17, because some of the material is also a proliferation issue for nuclear weapons. The process, the Agenda 2030, which is the largest ever process in the United Nations that has been evaluated externally. Up until 2015, every initiative by the UN was evaluated, guess by whom? By the UN. So, and they actually figured out that might not increase their credibility. Yeah? So they, for this process, for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, in the first time ever, they invited an independent panel of scientists to evaluate their progress. And this independent panel in 2019 published this report, which you can download for free from the internet. It's called The Future is Now: Science for Achieving Sustainable Development. And in this, the independent scientists look at how much progress has been reached between 2015 and 2019. So 4 years into the progress, into this program, which is for 15 years altogether. So it's the Agenda 2030 from 2015 to 2030. And what you can see here in green is that actually there is progress in the direction of the target. This is why it's green for goal number 3 and goal number 4. Now, goal number 3 is global health. And the story behind why the world is on track in terms of global health is a good story, I think. The sole indicator that switched this global health goal into the green realm was that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave millions of mosquito nets to developing countries. The other side of this graph is the more interesting, which is where we are actually not even moving slowly towards the goal, or we're not making progress, we're having a standstill. No, we're actually moving away from the goal. And the bad thing is that the goals number 14, 15, which is life on land and life below water, are among those where we're not making progress. And of course, goal number 13, climate action, this is the COP story. Yeah, you've just heard a lot about Glasgow. This is also moving away from the goal. Now, people are endlessly criticizing the SDGs, and I'm going to do that in say 15 minutes. But one good thing about them is that they allow you to track if the world is moving into a meaningfully sustainable direction or not. And you can easily see here that this is not the case. My point about this report is also that the future is now. And it's not, climate change, ladies and gentlemen, is not happening in the future. It is happening now. And every single person in the world also co-decides about it. Not with the same amount of agency. Yeah, I'm not blind to power. But I think that nobody should say it's not my thing. It's everybody's thing. And I'm quoting Paul O'Brien here to tell you what my position towards this whole process is. And what he wrote and what I would subscribe to is, what I want to strive for is humility, vigilance, honesty, and the energy to keep redistributing power in the right direction. And I'm going to try to do that with you tonight. Now, after the largest ever process of negotiations and consultations, these 17 goals were adopted in 2015. And it's a bit of a problem, actually, if you look at them, these 17 goals, and I've put them in the lower part of this, they're kind of one quadrangle after the other, colorful, look a little bit like a memory game for children or something like that. So the Stockholm Resilience Center has come up with this figure to say, okay, folks, these goals are somehow related to each other. Now this graph is called the wedding cake diagram. I'm not sure if I would subscribe to that. But what the idea is that the biosphere goals, which is life on land, life below water, clean water, and climate, these green and blue goals are the basis, and then come the society goals, and then come the economy goals, and the sort of this big piece of skewer to hold the wedding cake together, that is cooperation, strong institutions, and peace. Partnerships for the goals, as it's called. Now, as soon as Karl Folke and others published that, people came and shouted, "Are you silly? I mean, this is kind of putting the economy on top. We've had that for so long." So it's kind of also, it wasn't quite accurate. What is a more accurate way of looking at these goals is to look at them as a network. And this is one of the first network analyses that have been done with the goals. Now I realize I'm not at the Vienna University of Technology and it's gonna be over soon, yeah? But this is mathematics between the goals. What you can see here is each of those 17 goals has a number of targets. In German, Ziele und Unterziele, just if you wanna Google that in German. And purposefully, the engineers of this whole structure had several goals together having the same targets. So 2 goals share some of their targets, which is very sensible because sustainability is an issue that is as well social as it is economic, as it is biospheric, but it's none of the above, but it's all together. What you can see here is in 3 ways you can analyze this network. The breathtaking message in this is how central 2 of these goals are. As you can see, in each of the 3 mathematical ways to describe a network, degree, betweenness, and eigenvector, goal number 12 is central. Now, what is goal number 12? That is responsible production and consumption. This is at the heart of consumer society. And it's actually, the official formulation is the other way around. It's sustainable consumption and production. I hate that because production comes first. So I always tell it purposefully the other way around. So yes, this is at the heart of the matter. Changing consumer society, changing the way we produce. The second most important goal, though, is goal number 10. And that is reducing inequalities. So in order to achieve a sustainable development, to save our oceans, to save biodiversity, to save the climate, consumer society has to be transformed and inequalities have to be tackled. I think that this is a breathtaking message, actually. The third largest here is number 1, and this is zero poverty, which of course is linked to curbing national inequalities. Now, guess what? This picture has also been criticized in that it actually conveys the message that, as you can see here, the biospheric goals are very much on the periphery. And they're very small quadrangles, which means that they have very few connections. This is how this agenda was made. This is probably how we should think of as an input for the next process, which is already starting in the UN. I think next year they're actually going to start to discuss what comes after Agenda 2030. This needs to be taken into account. The SDGs have produced massive amounts of literature. And they've also produced integrated assessment models. This is a system dynamic model which works with the different SDGs. And this whole model, I can put this on one slide. I can just show you 2 of these sub-models here. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to get us out of trouble, but at least you can publish it in a peer-reviewed journal. What is missing is something pretty simple. The more we pollute and degrade habitable parts of the planet, think of my tree, the more dangerous this pollution is, the more long-term security risks we face, the more difficult is sustainable development. We create niches of uninhabitability. And that is, if I may say so, not a particularly good idea. And because this official image of the SDGs is these single tiles with no connections, and because even though goal number 12, transforming consumer society, is a goal, as I've showed you, we've not made much progress with the goals. You can see this kind of stuff. There is actually lots and lots of sustainable development goal merchandise. And I mean, what I particularly like is this idea that you can buy a cover for your smartphone. Okay. And because of my frustration with that, I started on a journey all over the world. I started on a global journey, and I'm going to take you with me on this global journey. And in the end, we're going to meet the two women with whom I then worked, and I brought you some of these specimens we did. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the vital parameters of the Earth. So I'm going to measure the temperature and a few other, and the heartbeat and stuff like that. And I think what you can say is that the Anthropocene, which you've probably heard about, is, to me, it's the toxic age. Global chemicals production is expected to double by 2030. In 2013, the registered amount of synthetic chemicals that were commercially available was 84,000. That's going to increase a lot. Not all of them are toxic, but most. The already widespread use of such chemicals will increase, including chemicals in consumer products. Many of them, as I said, are toxic. And you also have something which this whole discussion doesn't adequately acknowledge, and that is you have synergies between different toxins. And as Katharina mentioned, I'm a chemistry engineer, so I just put Rn here, which is the chemical symbol for radon, for a radioactive noble gas, which is, when breathed in, very cancerogenic. And if you are a smoker and you breathe in radon, you don't double the risk of lung cancer. You increase it by a factor of 210. So smoking plus radon is 210 times more toxic than either one. This is synergetic effects, and they are dramatic. They're not well known. So what am I talking about when I talk about what I'm going to be talking about, wicked legacies? I told you that one of the things that frustrate me so much about the sustainability debate is that it doesn't take legacy pollution into account. It might take into account what is done now, but what has already been done is usually just not looked at. We have, over the world, we have a lot of contaminated soils with POPs. You know what a POP is? A persistent organic pollutant. You have heavy metals, you have degraded and eroded soils, you have land subsidence and groundwater threats from mining. Of course, greenhouse gases are also a legacy. Nuclear weapons and the facilities used for them, for testing and manufacturing them. Nuclear waste throughout the fuel cycle are also one. Overfished and increasingly acidic seas, which completely alter marine ecosystems, and engineered rivers. These are among the things that sustainability should be aware of, and it's not, or not enough. Okay, now the next 10 slides are to give this claim credibility. I'm going to first take you to Giant Mine in Canada near Yellowknife. This was in operation between 1948 and 1999, and then finally decommissioned in 2004. 220 tons of gold were taken out, 220 tons of gold. And that left a waste of 237,000 tons of toxic arsenic trioxide. Arsenic trioxide is arsenic. It's the poison of some of the Miss Marple stories. It's been literally toxic. This is stored in 14 underground chambers. And when Giant Mine went bankrupt in 1999, the mine owner of the time, Royal Oak, left the federal and territorial governments with an extensive legacy of mine pollution. Now, this is nothing special. Mining companies usually take out and walk off. They just go bankrupt, and who's gonna do the cleanup? The public. So giant mine is an extremely expensive legacy issue, and the guess for remediation and perpetual maintenance. This is something that is gonna be there forever, which is kind of a long time. 1 billion Canadian dollars. Has anything happened? No, okay, you're okay. So what this means is that the people who are there have to find means to communicate with future generations. Now, how do they keep this stuff there? It's quite interesting because it's frozen. They froze the mine by heat exchangers, They've built heat exchangers to freeze the whole 14 chambers into a kind of, it's a deep freezer in terms of a deep freezer, The problem there is not immediate toxic release. It's the problem that you need to transfer the knowledge about the management requirements of this site, including these heat exchangers, which are maintenance free. This needs to be communicated to future generations. Now, you know that perhaps as nuclear semiotics, how do we tell people where our final storage is for waste? But that's even worse here. Arsenic is odorless, colorless, and if this starts leaking into the groundwater, that's going to be rather subtle. And the release could go unnoticed, and it could travel with the groundwater for a far way, and it would not be directly connected to the site of origin, and people would have a hard time figuring out why they're dying. There's a fantastic film about that, which I can only recommend. It's on Vimeo. It's called Guardians of Eternity. And this is exactly what it's about. And as you would by now expect, this is also a question of environmental injustice. The Dene people, the Yellowknife Dene First Nation, has lived there before the mine opened. They still live there. And now they must deal with the prospect of living with this arsenic trioxide for eternity. And they consider themselves now guardians of eternity. And when I learned about this, I started thinking if the term wicked legacies was coined by me and my coworkers. But I was thinking if that's enough. So I tried to start calling a few of these legacies monsters. I'm going to show you another such monster, or perhaps not. The question is, what makes a legacy wicked? Okay, there are at least 4 ways how you can make a legacy very wicked. There's this, actually, under Managua Air Force Airport, which is 20 kilometers south of La Habana, I think it's the capital of Cuba, there is a secret experimental installation for processing nuclear waste. And the workshop was built in communist Cuba. And actually nobody now, because of these changes in governments and because it was a military thing, so it was secret, has any knowledge about it. It's not a particularly good idea to have a nuclear legacy next to an Air Force base where they have all this volatile stuff. So citing, military secrecy, and changes of government with loss of knowledge are making legacies particularly wicked. Another one. There's a very, very, very good publication, can also be downloaded from the internet by Robert Hamilton, 5 years of war in the Donbass. And this is a particularly interesting mine. That's the Yunkom mine in the Donbass. It's a coal mine. It's been closed for a long time. But it was the site of a so-called peaceful nuclear explosion. In this coal mine, they had a problem with gas buildup. And they had this fantastic idea: if they dropped a small nuclear bomb into this coal mine and let it explode at the very bottom, then it would kind of create a hole, a chimney, through which all these toxic gases in the mine could leave. When they give up a mine, it fills up with water. So you have the rest of this underground nuclear explosion in the ground in the Donbass. And one of the things that happened during this war was that the idea was to turn off the pumps that take this water out in a controlled way. And I think that qualifies as a wicked legacy. Well, you judge if it's a monster. There are actually tons also of criteria for evaluating the risk of anything, also perhaps of such sites. And they talk about the extent of damage, the probability of occurrence, the incertitude, the ubiquity. And the problem that I have, why is this so little recognized, is because it is not ubiquitous. It is at a particular point, and so everybody else thinks it's not their problem. Persistency, irreversibility, and this delay effect. The delay effect, as you can see in Giant Mine, that it's not toxic right now, but it will be in the future, which is, I think, at the heart of the sustainability debate, makes it so hard to regulate these things. Let's travel to Johannesburg for a moment. What you can see here in gold is the gold mines. What you can see here in dark gray is what must no longer be called slums. It has now to be called informal settlements, but it hasn't materially changed in the way. 1.6 million people live in these informal settlements, so no proper water, no proper sewage. Informal means no infrastructure. They live actually pretty close to radioactive mine residues. And the majority of these residue areas is radioactive because uranium is a rather cheap thing. These are gold mines. These gold mines contain 10 times more uranium than they contain gold. But they take out the gold and they put the uranium-laden overburden, the rest of the milling operations, called the mill tailing, out there. And what you can see in this picture is how big these mining tailings are. On the right side of the picture shows you houses. Yeah, this is not a slum, this is a housing district. And you can see that the scale down there is 100 meters. So you can see that this is a huge thing. It's not the only one. Now what happens, yes?
Just to understand the picture right, the white thing is what and the black thing is what?
The white thing is?
The white thing, like this, there's a white area and there's a black area.
Yeah, this is kind of, it's like a dune, and one side is shown on by the sun and the other is in the shade. So this whole thing is this pile. Yeah? And it's loose material, so the wind can blow over it, and blow this uranium-laden dust anywhere. I do think that this type of thing qualifies as a monster. What people do, and this is again, this is a part of this city. And what you can see, the more red it is, the higher the radioactivity. And now look at this area which I have circled. You can see this line of higher radioactivity. This is where people have taken that mine overburden and repaired the road with it. Which is because they don't know. There is Cancer Corridor in Louisiana. So I've taken you from Canada to South Africa to the Donbass region. I'm now going to take you to Cancer Corridor, Louisiana, and I'm jumping between the East and the West in an attempt to show you that this is not a problem of either the East or the West. It's a global problem. In this map, which I also recommend very much, what you can see here is actually every single chemical compound that is produced. And you also see, if you look at it on your screen, the companies that produce it. And that is, we're talking about this area next to the Gulf of Mexico. Cancer Corridor is called Cancer Corridor because people there have above average cancer rates. And there is not much that is done to deal with this on a general level. It's only ever dealt with when there is a problem that comes out as a sort of an immediate problem. Yeah, if a death occurs, or if something breaks down, if a structure breaks down and has to be repaired, if there is a liability case. But Cancer Corridor are these many miles of highly industrialized area along the river. This is Lake Chaagan on the other side, created by a 140 kiloton peaceful nuclear explosion carried out on January 15, 1965. And what they were trying actually is to move the river. They wanted to move the river to a different place. The lake is so radioactive that you shouldn't go near. And this, as you can see, this person wears a respirator because you should not breathe the air. This is a nuclear submarine. Perhaps if you look closer, you can actually see that there's something going wrong with this nuclear submarine, this red part there in the middle. And this is a map where I'm showing you several of the sunken nuclear submarines in the Atlantic. I think I remember correctly that there's 8 sunken nuclear submarines, including their plutonium powered nuclear reactor and the missiles, the nuclear missiles. I think there's 8 in the Pacific and 6 in the Atlantic. Thrasher sank during deep diving tests approximately 350 kilometers east of Cape Cod in 1963. Scorpion, another one, carried 2 torpedoes with nuclear weapons containing plutonium. And actually, wow, the US Department of Defense analyzed the water there in 1986 and 1998, and they figured out that the plutonium wasn't yet coming out. We're moving to Myrosu. What you can see here is Central Asia. You can see Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, China. And each of these radioactivity signs is an area of radioactive waste tailings. The green triangles are areas of toxic waste tailings, and the red areas are areas of possible contamination. And of the 36 tailings, 31 contain radioactive waste, including 28 with uranium production waste of 8.2 million cubic meters, the production of polymetals containing thorium, which is yet another natural, what's natural? Thorium is completely harmless if it's 1 kilometer down under a lot of other material. It's not as harmless when it's up on the surface. Myrosu, which is in the middle here, was considered so toxic and dangerous that, and this is a picture of this thing, yeah? This red thing that you can see in the forefront is one of these tailing lakes. When these lakes were designed in the past, there were absolutely zero long-term protective measures. And the European Union took a lot of money in their hands, went to Myrosu and sort of not repaired, but at least saved 14 of the most dangerous of these tailings from immediate collapse. There is absolutely zero chance for peace without sustainability, because if we don't have peace, we will have wars for resources. So we need sustainability for peace. But we also need peace for sustainability, because everything you see here is from this military complex. Weapons production waste is now not with the Department of Defense in the US, but with the Department of Energy. And they are tasked with cleaning up the nuclear weapons complex. This is the largest cleanup task ever. It costs probably $200 billion or more, and it will require at least, and that is, I think, very, very optimistic, 30 years to complete. And I'm quoting here, the contamination created by the production of nuclear weapons is long-lived, extremely dangerous, difficult to remove, treat, and dispose. Some of the existing contamination is currently untreatable using existing technology. The separation of lithium-6 for tritium production, which is how we make hydrogen bombs, also used a lot of non-radioactive material, 10,000 tons of mercury. Mercury, Quecksilber, is also a toxic thing. And about 900 of these tons simply went missing. Nobody knows where they are. So they probably 110 tons of mercury were properly discharged in a creek in Oak Ridge. And it's actually migrated into a water reservoir that is used for recreation and also for municipal water supply. If you want to produce plutonium, you need massive amounts of uranium. So these 67 metric tons of plutonium that were produced for nuclear weapons in the United States came from almost 97,000 metric tons of irradiated uranium fuel. And the chemical processing of that uranium created 2 million cubic meters of highly radioactive, chemically toxic waste, which is hard to comprehend. Now, has anyone in this room had any contact with a site called Hanford before? Have you heard Hanford? Heard, yes, okay, yeah. It's a matter of age, I'm sorry to say. Yeah. Now, you've probably never seen plutonium. This is a ring made from its weapons grade plutonium, 5.3 kilograms, approximately 11 centimeters in diameter. Why is it made in a ring? so that the critical mass is not achieved. Yeah, this you have to distribute it. Metallic plutonium is flammable, especially when the material is finely distributed. If you put plutonium in humid air, it forms hydrides on the surface, which then can actually go aflame by itself. And if plutonium is burning, of course, plutonium oxide is formed, which increases the volume of that plutonium by 70%. So if you're not absolutely super careful with plutonium, it's going to ignite by itself in humid air, and it's going to destroy any container that is there to contain it. At the moment, we have approximately 2,000 tons of plutonium on the Earth, and 75 tons come in addition every year, because we create it in fast breeder reactors. Plutonium was made in Hanford, at the Hanford site. And the process liquids were stored in these containers, 177 underground containers, of which many only had a single shell. And when Donald Trump came to the presidency of the United States, the first thing he was thinking of was to dismantle the Nuclear Safety Board that was also in charge of this watchdogging of this waste treatment. The estimates of when the Hanford cleanup will be done show you the amount of hubris that exists in the technical cleanup people. Now, in the year 2010, they estimated that by September 2052, they would be done. Sometimes hubris is in the tables. 1,317 so-called superfund sites are in the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act registered toxic sites that are so dangerous that the United States made an extra amount of money available for their cleanup. If anybody wants to have these slides, they can just email me and I'll give them to you. Yeah, I'm happy if you take photographs, but if you want us to have the slides for your personal use, email me and I'll give them to you. Of these toxic sites in the Superfund process, here are the ones that are regulated by the Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board. And you can see here Rocky Flats, Hanford, and others, which are among the most toxic remains of the nuclear weapons production. How many nuclear warheads are at the moment available within 15 minutes after decision? Any idea? So if we decide nuclear war is going to happen now, within 15 minutes, how many nuclear warheads can be deployed?
Worldwide or?
Worldwide. How much? 1,000? Okay. 14,000. But that was after disarmament. The maximum that was available on the Earth to destroy it was 86,000. So this is just to tell you that we're talking about massive amounts of waste. By the way, all this stuff also creates a lot of greenhouse gases. Now, guess what? Military greenhouse gases are not included in any of the UNFCCC treaties.
Sorry, why is that?
Because they don't want it.
Yeah, of course, but like, yeah, it's a good question, but like, I would like to.
Now, the point was that the countries with a very high military spending, above all the US, said we don't want it to be included, and so it wasn't included. So what we tried was to say, we've created arrangements with transformative legacies, with legacies that are so dangerous that they are transforming society. Nuclear power plants, deep mines, industries using or producing toxic compounds such as mercury, even exploitative fisheries. But then we became aware of the fact that this is not just it. And I want to remind you of this story of the airport, next to Havana. Secrecy, bad siting choices, changes in governance, loss of documentation increases the wickedness of such legacies by a fair bit. So legacy wickedness is a combination of longevity, toxicity, synergies with natural hazards. In Myrosu, this is a tectonically active valley with a lot of earthquakes, which can then bring these milling dams easily down. Security, legal issues, like for instance, bankruptcy, secrecy, and then there are, of course, also technical challenges of remediation, which are fortunately mediated by the resilience of people. Now, people who know are better off than people who don't know, which is why I'm touring through the world with this story. Usually, the old, the very young, and the mothers with young children are the most vulnerable. The poor are the most vulnerable. So, curbing inequalities would also fit very well with this legacy issue. But we also need governance and intergenerational communication skills. And unfortunately, there are no agreed upon indicators. So that's not fed into international negotiations because nobody knows how to measure it, or nobody wants to know how to measure it. And I want to remind you of this, what I said. The contamination created by the production of nuclear weapons is long-lived, extremely dangerous, difficult to treat, remove, and dispose, and some of the existing contamination is currently untreatable using existing technologies. Legacy issues are not a problem that can be solved as such. Just repairing all these legacy issues is an end of the pipe technology, basically. They are a constitutive part of global society, which cannot, to my opinion, be understood without its military logic. And actually, this military logic was a central driving force behind the development of consumer society. In Hanford and its sister plutonium factory in Mayak in the Soviet Union, people working in these extremely dangerous plutonium factories were given a lot of privileges. Housing, actually in Mayak you could have caviar, leather shoes, handbags, stuff that was not available anywhere else in the Soviet Union because these were workers. They were closed up, they couldn't move out of Mayak, but they were given consumer goods, status goods to sort of keep them calm and irradiated. I think one can say, and this is by Kate Brown, the idea the Cold War created consumer society. It created the modern family, its spatial arrangements, its goals, its aspiration, its belief in progress, and its loyalty to privileges and jobs. It created it first in these nuclear cities with the nuclear family radiantly succumbing to the military security logic and its complete contempt for humanity. And then you see these sustainable development goal merchandise, and you see these colorful pictures. And what I think is consumer society goes SDG. And what it did to me was very close to that. It created helplessness, and it actually created a kind of depression. And I was starting to talk to Ellen Halitius-Glück. Could we be creating a critical practice, a practice that connects? And this is Ellen, and this is part of her website. Ellen is a textile mathematician, a philosopher, a weaver, a researcher. She's also an artist. When I started talking to Ellen and told her the story, how frustrated I was about the SDG merchandise and these single goals vis-a-vis this threat to humanity, she understood. And she brought in Charlotte Holzer. And the three of us tried to create something which would be a healing practice to ourselves, and a practice that would allow for emergence, for something to emerge from this collective helplessness. And Charlotte is a textile restorator. She works at the Deutsche Museum, and her big piece was to restore a ballroom dress made of glass. And you can see her here restoring this glass dress. Ellen and Charlotte and myself share this double identity of being creative people and researchers. And Charlotte then tried to weave the SDGs. And we did this with tablet weaving. And the three images, the three bands that are on this image, I brought them to you. And I'm going to pass them around because I think it is interesting to actually feel it. When it becomes tangible, it becomes comprehensible. So the first idea was that she would put all the goals into one band, that she would free some space for the visualization of these, and that she would try, and that is to be seen in this band with a lot of white in, if she could go diagonal or if she could also create a wave pattern, which you can also see on this picture here. And she worked with a lot of technical difficulties here. Then she tried to interweave content and pattern. And she tried to use these biospheric goals and mix them with all the other goals. And for those of you who have done tablet weaving, this is tablet weaving scripts that you're seeing here. So any tablet weaver who knows the trade can actually rebuild her bands using these scripts. And her point in the end was that she began thinking in the weave. So she started to group the goals on tablets. Each of the tablets, these are tablet weaving is with small pieces of cardboard or anything, and there's 4 holes in each. So she grouped them on the tablets and she tried to simplify complex patterns. And what she created here is not just beautiful, it is actually thinking about the connection between the goals through weaving. And she tried to connect unconnected goals via other goals. So she was asking herself, could I bring these things in communication via intermediaries? And what she also learned, and you can see this in this last image here, is that in order for a complex new pattern to emerge, you need space and time. So this networking process actually can't be done with 2 turns of the tablets. It needs space and it needs time. And that changed the way I was thinking about the world. Let me go back for a moment. The half-life of plutonium is approximately 24,000 years. Arsenic trioxide is toxic forever. There is no way back to a simple life. We actually need a complex techno-society if we want to transform the world towards a sustainable development, because we need to take care of these wicked legacies. And I still think that many of them should be called monsters. We are already, will it or not, guardians of eternity. And monster sites, which is now finally my definition, are beyond our current abilities. If you want to manage these legacies, you need functioning critical infrastructures. You need electricity, you need sewage. You actually also need disaster response capabilities. You need to have people who can react to a disaster, because disasters will happen. You need trained experts, which means you need a functioning education system. And in order to manage that, you need a functioning government with different agencies in that government taking care of that stuff. You also need anti-corruption measures. I didn't go into this, but I can tell you that corruption is a big problem in this. So what you need is actually functioning public media and a functioning legal system, which cannot be had unless you have democracy. So basically what you need is a complex weave. The knowledge that I acquired through working on these tablets and in other ways with my hands, by learning to produce tablet woven bands, has transformed the way that I conceive of transformative learning. It has changed the way I think of education for sustainability. And Katharina knows that, because I fervently actually at first refused to do what I did today. I said, no, you can't do it without people doing it. And she said we couldn't do that. So I tried to do it without doing it, but I still believe you would go out here differently had you tried it. Now the problem is there are no quick wins in handicraft. Either you do it for a day, then you can at least produce something which will look faintly like a tablet band, or you actually go into the craft, and Charlotte worked on this for months. But it actually did help me with dealing with this helplessness that comes when you work with these toxic legacies, the monsters. I don't weave, but this is how my working desk very often looks like. And in order to prove that this is not just a fake picture, I actually have them here. And I've become kind of a weird type of celebrity in the knitting world. So the magazine The Knitter is going to run a 2-page special on me in its Christmas edition. I'm not sure if you should read that, but what you surely would want to read is the Lancet Commission's report on pollution and health. Thank you very much. And I think in order to record this whole thing so that we can also hear your questions, you have to speak into this microphone, right? So Katharina will go around and catch you.
Thank you so much, Verena. What a really touching and exciting lecture. I'm really almost overwhelmed. Thank you so much. A lot of topics and issues we could discuss now. I'm sure there are a lot of questions from your side and comments or thoughts about what Verena was talking about. We have now enough time to answer your questions or to discuss things. So if there is no question at the moment from the audience, I would like to, there are a lot of things happening, of course, in my mind or have been happening during your lecture, but two things which I personally find so important are the ones that the one is that how you showed that by doing things with your hands, like the weaving or the knitting, is so important to make it possible to recognize wicked problems or wicked legacies in that case, right? And I think this is something what we're trying to do here at the University of Applied Arts, that art not only, of course, it has a strong issue with the aesthetics and with critical thinking and experimenting and doing research and all these things, but it still also has this issue, this aspect of doing something with your hands, even when you're using machines or what other technologies. And so I think it's a great idea what you did together with these two artists, trying out a new approach how to deal with these overwhelming problematic issues, as you said, that are so overwhelming that we feel like powerless in front of them. So, and the other thing is, of course, that what you said before is that I didn't. I thought we don't have the time that every one of us does this weaving, because, as you said, we would need a whole day for at least get an idea of what's going on here. But maybe you also could talk a little bit also about what you originally wanted to talk about, namely the legacy of the First World War, and a question which comes up with me every time when we're talking about these things is, what do you think, how can we bridge this problem between the ecological and the educational and the social aspects of pollution, of climate crisis and so on? Because I think the moment you're pulling at one side of the string, then the other side goes in the wrong direction. And if you do something, or if you turn the screw on the one side, then there is something happening on the other side which might not be the things you were intending that comes out. So this systemic and complex interrelationship of these issues together, how would you deal with this problematic issue?
Well, this is at least three very interesting questions, Katharina. Thank you. And I mean, so let me start with the last one. Actually, I did not show you a lot of this sustainable development goal literature because I think it is scholarly, and it's an insider's game. But what these people with their painstaking work have shown is that yes, there are trade-offs between goals, which is what you said. We're pulling one string and we're pulling something which we think is a good idea, and then yes, there are trade-offs, but there are way more co-benefits than trade-offs, which is actually a cool and good message. Yeah. you can achieve, for instance, global equality, no poverty, female empowerment, and good health all together. Yeah. So it's not that each of these goals would be compromised by achieving progress towards another goal. And what in the future is now, this report says that there are 6 entry points and 6 levers to achieve sustainable development. And they're talking about governance, and they're talking about science, and they're talking about others. But I want to pick up on this governance issue. I think that whoever works for democracy actually also works for cleanup. So it's not that you, because things are connected, you have many possible entry points. And that, I think, is a good message. Yeah. And it's not that artists alone can do, nor can applied artists, nor can scientists, nor can anybody. But if we weave it together, we might actually achieve quite something substantial. And I do think that what creates vulnerability is not knowing. Yeah? Now, let me just get, who has a Geiger counter at home? Okay. I have one, yes. You have one? Yeah, okay. I mean, this is a logical thing because we are surrounded by aging nuclear reactors, and one of them eventually is very likely to go off. Yeah, and it is smart to have a Geiger counter at home. Yeah, unless you have a radio that will work without electricity. Yeah, because if you don't have a radio that works with solar power or with a crank, then you won't be able to listen to the messages coming from the radio to you, telling you to take care and don't go out because we're under a radioactive cloud. So you can, I have a radio and a Geiger counter, but that's not necessary, but one of them would be a good idea. So all of you who think you're not technical enough to have a Geiger counter at home, go and buy one of these crank radios because you might need it. And think of your mobile phone in case of a disaster with a blackout as a decorative item. Yeah, it won't be of any other use, just in case. Yeah, so I mean, I try to give you something practical. My point here is that not knowing makes you vulnerable. I just try to show you that. What makes you even more vulnerable is not wanting to know. And in order to be able to want to know something which is unpleasant, you have to have some kind of self-centeredness, of strength, of inner strength. And I think that the mere fact that you can have some, for instance, clothing sovereignty by making something yourself, or by having this classic community living pot of basil. Yeah, it's better than nothing. It shows you that you have some agency. And having no knowledge and having the feeling that you have no agency is the worst. So I think that there is a way to create agency by accepting that these are facts, and you would probably not be happy because you know it, but you can be more sustainable. And World War I think is a big thing, yeah. But if you want to Google Place à Gaz, this is near Verdun. That's a place where, in order to deal with the grenades with war gas, which contain arsenic, they were all piled up at the end of the war and burned to make them go away. Now there's so much arsenic in the soil there that they have this uninhabitable, don't go near signs there, which are actually already showing signs of age, and some of them are lying on the ground. And the moss that grows in this forest actually doesn't grow in the soil. The soil is too toxic. So the moss has developed a way to deal with this, in that the moss grows in little balls, which are then blown over the surface, which I think speaks to the ability of the moss, which is helpful, because some stuff actually survives under extremely toxic circumstances. But that's kind of an anecdote. What can be shown in World War I is this was the first industrial war. It was the first war that was fought with fossil fuels. And this is probably the greatest message of hope I can give you. A post-fossil fuel society will simply not have enough energy to be so self-destructive. On a renewable basis, we will have half as much energy as we have now, which we might actually need for other things, which is why we need democracy to make these decisions. But I mean, just to give you one example, the entire bomb material of the entire Second World War was less bomb material than was used in the Vietnam War. So the amount of material and the amount of destruction that was created with that bomb material has gone up exponentially since the First World War. And that's the turning point, because it's the first war that is fought with fossil fuels. Wars were not nice before. I'm not claiming that, but they were more limited in how much material destruction they could make. So a post-fossil fuel world is going to be also, to some extent, it must be more peaceful. There was a question in the back there, and I think you need to go there with the mic.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would like to connect to a few things you said. And one thing is this agency that you're talking about. As I heard in many discussions, the agency that you actually can claim for yourself is the one where you specialize so much on an area where you're competent, that you get the feeling that you can make a difference. And we, as I think designers, artists, and researchers, can do exactly what you describe with this loaded images and symbols, to make a statement, for example. So that's the first thing. And the second actually was a question connecting to what you said just a minute ago. Because I also heard that in the future there won't be, so there are some voices that say in the future there won't be less coal, gas, oil, Funde, found. Yeah.
You will still find it, but lingo, leave it in the ground. Yeah.
Okay. Because there are different.
It is not scarce.
There's this book called 10 Billions, and from, I forgot. Anyway, the statement that the author is making is that he's not hearing that the energy that we're consuming will decrease, but in the opposite, we will always find more and more small reserves of oil and gas. So how do you find hope in that? Because if the nature has some energy resources that we still can extract, like there seems to be no limit.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So one, technology is not the problem. Taking that stuff out of the ground, yes, you can do that. Yeah. The story is, as soon as you burn it, you create CO2, and as soon as you actually, as you take natural gas out, you create methane, which is even worse. And there is this movement that says, as I said, lingo, yeah, leave it in the ground. And we've not exhausted the source. We've exhausted the sink, so to say. We've exhausted the emission sink, which is our atmosphere. That is full, yeah? And how much ever you're going to put, if you have a full bathtub, yeah, even if the water could still be running, you don't want to turn it on because it's gonna flood your bathroom. So that's the story, yeah? And about there's my Institute of Social Ecology does a lot of this modeling stuff, and so does YASA. And YASA has done a lot of reports, which is called TWI, The World in 2050, and you can download their scenarios, and they have different narratives of different futures. There's this techno-optimist future, but there's also other futures. And for the other thing, for the competence thing, I don't think so. And I'm going to pull this thing up to me to draw something. Yeah. Invariably, all these big books are written by men, which I find interesting. Okay, so what you can see here now is a person with a deep competence in one thing. Yeah? That's disciplinary, in-depth competence. They are differently competent, but they're all competent. Each of them for something else. Yeah? In order for them to be able to put their competences together, what they need is what we call the T competence. The T competence model tells you, yes, disciplinary in-depth competence is good and necessary. It is not the same as interdisciplinary communication competence and interdisciplinary willingness to understand. I'll talk about this here in a moment, yeah? But what the world needs is T competence. So don't give up on your competence to make a difference, but don't concentrate just on it, because then you might be, a Leibniz monad. So you just, if you don't connect, it's not gonna affect anybody. Now, what do you need here? Interestingly, what you need is two things that are among the old virtues and not usually in any curriculum. One is the ability to trust others. Now, this guy's competence is out of your depth competence. So you have to trust this person, that this person is actually not lying, he's not he's not a joke, yeah? It's okay. The other thing is, to some extent, even more difficult. You need to have an acknowledgement of your own limits. And I called this, in the very beginning of my talk, I said humility. Know your own bounds. Know that you don't know all. Because humility and trust is what bridges people. But there's a third one. And because it's been a very long day, I can't think of it in English now, but it's mood. It's courage, probably. Yeah, I mean, there are several possible translations, but I think it's courage. And perhaps there's one more thing. These are the three central types of abilities that you need in order to bridge this gap. The fourth one, I would say, is curiosity. So I'm a curious person. I'm going to move this. So whoever wants to take this as a picture can do that. But that is what we should be teaching. And that is what my faculty for interdisciplinary studies, of which I was dean for 6 years, tried. And then we were dissolved.
That's why we are going to do this now here.
Yeah, good idea.
With our new programs. Yes, there is another question.
Hello, Charlotte Ruth. I was wondering whether you were going to say curiosity or time. I found it extremely sad that not even in an art institution we have time to weave together, because for me it's like the one thing that is missing in that picture is exactly to have like the time to do that together with other people as well. And I know that we have to dissolve now and I know that I have to go home to my kids, etc., etc. But I really wonder, because you were touching that, like how like if I have this curiosity and if I have tools, how can I convince other people to take the time to listen to me and be weaving with me? Like, of course, it's a rhetorical thing because it goes to you and it goes to everyone else in the room. But yeah.
Well, you know, there is a function, mathematically speaking. Trust is only developed over repeated interactions. Yeah, and that is not just my idea, but every tit-for-tat model which is run for several generations shows that repeated interactions are a necessity to develop trust. So that needs time. Yeah, and of course, courage also needs time. Yeah, because if you try something new, you're not going to be perfect in the first instance. And the academic system of merit, I think, is counterproductive to that. What I notice is that, I mean, you told about how massively important super professor I am. Yeah, I just couldn't care less. Yeah, I do what I find important because my university can't really get rid of me, whatever I do. And I think it's on us who have a fixed position to take up courage and humility and try to create pockets of time that can also be used by the young people. And of course, I mean, I'm 60, I'm still curious. That doesn't go away. You don't need to. If you're a curious person, you're probably curious till the very end. That's not something to worry about. But I think my colleagues are just not courageous enough. Yeah, I don't publish this peer-reviewed stuff anymore. Yeah, because they can't do anything against me. I can go and take time, and this is not done in a moment. What I showed you today is several years of research, but I think it's important, and I just couldn't care less what my director thinks about it. And it's on us, and you should demand it from those people in fixed positions. And if they say, no, well, but you're the young ones, do we just tell them what I said?